Not me, but my dad. In the UK, so outside of London, you rarely hear about this sort of shit. Both my dad and his brother have been heroin addicts, as long as I can remember. My dad lucked out with genes, and is good looking, articulate, funny, and sensitive. My uncle however is rail thin, bald and suffering from agoraphobia. So a few years ago, they get clean. My dad, ever supportive, wants to help my uncle stop living in my nan's living room, so encourages him to set up a dating profile to meet a possible girlfriend. Uncle is at first enthusiastic, but over the course of the evening he drinks, and dad is badgering him to take pictures for the profile. They both end up getting angry and dad shouts that all he does is try to help, and why won't uncle take the help? All goes quiet and both return to their respective rooms. 5 minutes later, uncle charges dad with a knife, aims for his torso, but somehow narrowly misses, leaving a deep wound in his inner arm. A few millimeters to the left and the knife would have gone right through dad's lung. So yeah, that was the boiling point of 30 plus years of pent up frustration and jealousy, plus an addiction and mental health issues. Riding my bike home slow on the sidewalk, stoned with headphones on late one night. Super chill, done it a million times. I see at an intersection up ahead a group of 4 people walking a little spread out, 2 by 2, so there is a lot of room to bike between them. As I get close, my paranoid brain decides I should still just try to go around the whole group, and as soon as I veer left to go around the group, one of them quickly lunges at me and reaches, so I veer hard into the street. Luckily no cars, because I didn't look. I pedal to the metal as the guy runs alongside me, swearing and reaching for a few seconds, until I get full speed and get past him. I then hear several shots from something, and bike full tilt the rest of way. Not sure what I avoided, but it was likely nothing good. I'm late to the party and I never post, but here goes. About 10 years ago I was dating a guy, we'll call him Jay, who was an avid musician with a temper and a substance abuse problem. I was young and naive, only 19. My father had just passed away the year prior to that, and I was in a very vulnerable and distressed emotional state. One night, Jay came home around 3 AM and rolled on top of me in our bed. I tried to shove him off, and he blew a fucking gasket. Started punching walls, throwing things around. He flipped over my rabbit's hutch and threw my bunny into the wall. He shattered his thigh and pelvis. So, I said I've had enough of his abuse. Up until then his violent outbursts and slapping me around had become commonplace. I told him I was going to call the police, and when I turned my back to him to get my cell phone, I was struck from behind. Arsehole broke a guitar over my head. I turned around, and he hit me in the side of my head, right behind left temple. Swung it at my head like a baseball bat. He knocked me down, and proceeded to beat me with the neck of the guitar. The body had been smashed apart over my skull. I'll never forget that sound. He then continued to beat me with the metal truss bar when it popped out of the neck. All over my neck, back, arms, chest and head. Every time I tried to stand, he kicked me down. I had crawled under an old solid wood table and used the beam to protect my head. I kind of stuck my head under the beam and wrapped my arms tightly around it to protect the most vulnerable part of my neck, if that makes sense. I guess he grew tired of beating me, so I tried to make a run for it. He snatched me by my hair. I was naked from the waist up. He threw me down onto my back and straddled me, put his hands around my throat, and said, "I'm going to kill you, you fucking bitch," over and over again. I thought my eyes and tongue were going to pop out of my head. Here is what saved me. I was naked and covered in blood. It was like trying to wrestle someone covered in Kai jelly. My brother is a black belt, my father was a soldier and an MP, and they both taught me some basic self-defense moves. I was able to, despite him being much taller and stronger, roll and twist my way out of his holds, but never for long. Just long enough to catch a breath. I was getting so tired. I remember begging him not to do this. His DNA was all over my body. He was too drunk. They would catch him. That only made him more angry. Then finally, a light bulb went off. I had a strange out-of-body experience. I was face down being strangled from behind, and he was sitting on my back. I managed to wiggle enough to gasp, "Jay, I'm pregnant." And the motherfucker let me go. He let me go and all he asked was, "What?" And so I just started screaming, "I'm pregnant," over and over again. I ran naked out of my front door screaming. I pounded on my neighbor's door, tried to break it down. I was so panicked and hysterical. The police came and arrested him on 6 or 7 different felony charges. His mother blackmailed and bribed me into dropping the charges. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I slept with a loaded gun under my bed for 6 months. My only regret is not sending that asshole to prison. The whole thing was a shit show. I've managed to put it behind me. And hey, asshole, if you're reading this, you know who you are. You didn't break me, but you will always be a part of me. I'm not done with you, yet. Mine isn't really a nice story, but I was dating a guy and his dad died early on in the relationship. He became increasingly more unstable, and I was struggling to support him. One day we were over by his parents' house, and his mom had to leave for a few hours. After that he started drinking, and we got into a fight. I was going to leave, but he stopped me and beat me senseless. I started to yell in hopes that the neighbors would save me, but he dragged me by the hair into his dad's office and kicked me while I was on the floor. Then he opened his dad's drawer and pulled out a gun. I remember time slowed down. He was just sitting there staring at me and putting bullets in the chamber while I realized that the front door was locked and I couldn't make it to the back door in time. He raped me with the gun, pressed long ways against my temple. I can still feel that coldness. Then he made me shower and put on old clothes of his. Then he made me pray for forgiveness outside of an altar his family had in their backyard. Outside of it, because I was too tainted to step inside apparently. Then I went home and pretended nothing happened because I was too scared and ashamed. You'd think I would have left, but that kicked off the sexual violence part of his abuse for the next 3 years before I got out. Loads of other times he almost killed me, but that was the most terrifying, as it was the first and the only time I saw the gun. He's still a free guy walking around living life. Using a throwaway. I was at a Walmart with a friend of mine. We will call him Joe for this. Joe and I were walking around Walmart at like 2 in the morning when we noticed some dude following us throughout the store. I thought it was their loss prevention people making sure we weren't stealing anything. Anyways, after walking around for a bit, we left the store and walked to our vehicle. The man was still following us, but he had a friend with him this time. I told Joe, hey, I think that guy is still following us, maybe we should go back inside. Joe said that it was nothing and that they would probably park near us. When we got to the car, one of the men called out to us. They then walked up and asked if we smoked. Joe said yes, and the man asked for a cigarette. Joe gave him one and handed his lighter over so that the man could light it. During this time I had unlocked my door and acted as if I was grabbing a cigarette too, or whatever. In reality I pulled a small .380 from under the seat and stuck in my pocket. It's a .380 bodyguard, if anyone wants to know. They are small and perfect for carry. The man then turned to act as if he was walking away when Joe asked for his lighter back. Dumb mistake now, I know. The man turned around and said he wanted to keep it. Joe said no and an argument started. What started as yelling back and forth quickly turned into shouting, which then turned into the man's friend getting a knife out and stabbing Joe. We found out later it was 5 times. I instantly retrieved the gun from my pocket and shot the man with the knife. His friend started to charge me, and I shot him as well. The first man that was shot died at the scene, and the other lived. Joe is alive as well. What was just supposed to be a fun night had rapidly turned into a 2-year-long ordeal that I'm glad is over with. I'm probably late to the thread, but here goes. I haven't told many people about this. My boyfriend at the time convinced me to go camping with a few of his friends and their 10-year-old daughter. We were tent camping in a relatively empty campground about 2 hours away from home, and we had brought our 11-month-old Saint Bernard. The second afternoon everyone was drinking pretty heavily, except me. I don't drink, and I could tell he was getting too drunk. He grabbed a bottle of Jack and just started chugging, and it was like a light switch flipped. He was screaming at everyone and trying to fight one of the guys, and I didn't want young girl to see this. So I convinced my boyfriend to go with me into the woods with our dog. When we were out of earshot of the campground, he just went insane. Started screaming that I had ruined his life, grabbed me by the shirt, and started flinging me around. He tried to kick our dog, but I put myself in between us and endured the worst beating of my life. Halfway through I realized he had a massive hunting knife hanging off his belt, but he was too drunk to realize it was there, and I wanted to make sure he didn't suddenly remember. So I let him use me as a punching bag to keep him focused until he ran out of steam and passed out. I went back to the campground, packed up my shit and my dog and drove home, and didn't tell anyone what happened until I finally got the nerve to kick him out 5 months later. I kept the dog. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily 6 PM Reddit uploads.